Megan and I started dating in high school, and it was still an innocent, platonic relationship. I was 2 years older than her, and it was more like a friendship than a romance. We grew up, and that friendship gradually turned into real love. When I graduated high school, my parents, using their connections, wanted me to go to a university of technology, but I wanted to go to law school. My parents, of course, resented this. "Why waste time pursuing something so uncertain?" they asked. I graduated from school with honors and began to prepare for college. Megan knew about my plans and said she would be waiting for me. We corresponded and called each other often. A year and a half later, I went straight from the train with flowers and gifts to the restaurant where Megan had her graduation party. She had told everyone in advance that I would be one of the invited guests. When I walked into the hall with the flowers, I saw her in her fancy dress with her hair curled. When she saw me, she just shrieked with delight, ran to me and hung around my neck. The prom was fantastic. We danced, had fun, and I proposed to Megan in a solemn atmosphere to a round of applause. She happily accepted. Her parents were also at the graduation. They shook their heads in displeasure, but kept silent. The next day we had a family meeting. My parents, like hers, were also against the wedding, saying that we still had to study and all that, and they suggested we live without marriage for a while. When we finished our studies, we could talk about getting married, but we decided that we'd go to school and that one thing didn't prevent another. The wedding was modest, just relatives and closest friends, by the way, in the same restaurant where Megan's graduation party was held. My grandfather, before I went to college, gave me a gift of his 2-room apartment in the city. He moved to a country house, so we didn't have any housing problems. I got a job at a bank as a cash collector, and at the same time I enrolled in law school. Megan entered the full-time faculty of economics. In 2 years we had a daughter. I had to take extra shifts, and besides all this, I had to study. Megan switched to part-time education. It was very difficult, but we endured everything. I got a law degree and was promoted to the security service of the bank. The salary was higher, and I had more status. Megan went to work in a wholesale company as an economist. After we were married for 8 years, our daughter Julia went to school. My grandfather died, and my parents sold his country house and their apartment, moving to Florida. They built a house there. Julia spent almost all vacations with them, and at the end of the summer, Megan and I visited them sometimes, and her parents came too. I grew in my career, and in the same bank, I became the head of the legal department. Megan also got an executive position in her firm. We lived well. I started talking about having a second child, but Megan dodged the subject. As it seemed to me, we lived in love, friendship, and harmony. I never neglected her with attention, compliments, flowers, and gifts. Yes, there were minor quarrels on domestic grounds, as in any family, but everything ended with a night of reconciliation and compromise. 6 months ago, the following events took place, which I want to tell you more about. It happened in the summer when Julia was visiting her grandparents in Florida. Megan started working late and changed her image, hairstyle, wardrobe, makeup. She fulfilled her marital duties and became even more passionate. Lunches and dinners became tastier. Nothing changed outwardly, but she became more secretive. She was often on her cell phone. When someone called her, she'd go to the bathroom or the kitchen. I didn't think much of it at first, but it was disturbing. One day I went to work and remembered that I had left some important documents at home. I came back and saw that my wife, Megan, was hurriedly packing her things. I asked if it was an urgent business trip. She sat down on the couch and lowered her head. "Michael," she said, "we need to talk." That phrase, "we need to talk," has always frightened me the most. Most of the time it sounds like a death sentence. I just asked in a shaky voice who he was. She, guilty and sad, said, "What's the difference? You don't know him anyway. He's someone I met by chance, and it was just an explosion inside of me. My darling Michael, understand, you're very good. I've never cheated on you or looked for a new relationship. You're a wonderful husband and a great father to our daughter. Are you really ready to leave her behind? Are you ready to let her become part of his life in Dubai? He's not married and doesn't have a harem. I'm flying with him through Istanbul to Dubai to meet his family. I've thought about our daughter. I'll fly back in a month and we'll get a divorce. I'll pick up Julia, and if you want her to be happy, you have to accept this." At this point, I didn't let her continue. I twisted a combination of 3 fingers and showed it to her. As soon as you cross the threshold of this apartment, forget that you have a daughter, because I will never give my consent to take her away. She looked at me with pain and said sadly, "Maybe you're right. When she grows up, she can make her own decision. But know that I may be leaving you, but I'm not giving up on our daughter. Please don't blame yourself for what happened. You're a good man. You'll always be my nearest and dearest, but I'm sorry, I've fallen in love. Forgive me and let me go." Her phone rang. She picked it up and said, "I'm coming out," and walked out the door. I stood there stunned. Then I rushed after her and yelled in the hallway, "Megan, come to your senses. What are you doing? You'll regret this." She turned back and said, "Michael, it's better to do it and regret it than to not do it and regret it. Goodbye, take care of Julia." To say I was shocked is an understatement. I remember how I got to work, handed over the documents, and went to my boss. He asked, "Michael, did something happen? You look terrible." "Family problems. I need some time off," I replied. "Yes, of course. You've got a couple of weeks' worth of leave already. Keep your deputy up to date, leave the application, and take a week off." "Thank you," I said barely audibly. I turned around and went to the exit. "Hang in there, Michael. You never know where you'll find it," he said as I left. I came home from work, sat on the couch, and stared at one point, tears rolling down my cheeks. I couldn't think of anything. Towards evening, I went to the bar, ordered a bottle of whiskey, and drank it while reminiscing about our life since high school. Maybe it was because I was her first, the only one. Maybe it was because we got married early. I had a lot of questions, a lot of assumptions, but no answers. It was getting dark. I'd had a decent amount at the bar and the customers were leaving. I asked the bartender to call me a cab and gave him the address. When the cab pulled up to the house, I saw a light on in the kitchen and a floor lamp in the room. I remembered very well that I didn't turn it on when I went to the bar. What the hell? I thought. I got out of the car, staggered home, got the key, opened the door, and walked into the apartment. I could barely move my legs. I dragged myself into the kitchen, and who do you think was sitting at the table? Yes, my wife Megan. She was drunk too. There was an empty bottle of cognac and a second open bottle. There was a sliced banana and some chocolate. Megan looked at me with eyes full of tears and pain. Honestly, with the recent events, I wasn't even surprised. Even if an alien had been sitting at the table, I wouldn't have been fazed. Neither she nor I said a word. I grabbed a bottle of cognac off the table, took a few swigs, and blacked out. I woke up in bed the next morning with no clothes on. The place looked like a mess. I felt like I'd woken up in a nightmare. I remembered coming home and seeing Megan drunk at the table. She'd left me and our daughter and flown off to Dubai. I sat up in bed, my mouth dry and my head pounding. But judging by the bags in the room and the smell of my favorite fried tomato and cheese toast, I realized that Megan's sudden appearance wasn't my drunken delusion. Megan had changed into a silk robe, her eyes still full of guilt and remorse. She opened her mouth to say something, but I gestured to stop her. "Megan," I said in a hoarse voice, "I need a beer. My head is splitting." She went to the refrigerator, took out a few bottles of my favorite beer, and put them on the table. I grabbed one, opened it, and sipped more than half a bottle. The cool moisture started to quench the fire inside of me, and I started to slowly come to my senses. She put my favorite egg toast with tomatoes and cheese and some fried smoked sausages on the table, but I didn't feel like eating yet. I was quiet for a while, then I looked at Megan and in an even voice asked, "Well, what do you mean by all this? Do you think I'm a complete fool, an idiot, a despicable person?" "Megan," I said without emotion, "let's leave the self-defeating talk. First answer me, how did you get in? You left your keys on the coffee table." I pointed to where they still lay. She giggled sadly. "I got in with Julia's keys. I forgot to take out a bunch and they came in handy." "Why did you come back?" I asked. Megan didn't say anything at first, then I guessed. "Most likely your Arabian stallion replaced you at the last moment with someone else for his stable." Megan turned away shamefully. I kept going, "Yeah, I get it. You suddenly realized at the last moment that you weren't ready to leave me and our daughter. You weren't ready to destroy our family. You remembered the good things we had, and just before the plane landed, Your conscience woke up and you thought, "Oh God, what am I doing?" Megan looked up and asked defiantly, "What if that's what happened?" I winced. "And you think I'd believe that, Megan? We've lived together for so many years. You had nothing with him." "We didn't have time," she replied. "I gave him the condition that no intimacy would happen before I talked to you and before the divorce. I didn't want to feel like a cheating wife. Isn't that just the innocence and respect you'd expect?" And he approved, saying he didn't want to share me with anyone, not even my husband. He said while we were getting to know his family, I'd have a separate room, and he'd never come after me unless I was ready. "Okay," I said. "So did he suddenly dump you at the last minute? Why did you change your mind?" Megan said quietly, "Something more horrible and scary happened. I was literally on the verge of death." "You're scaring me, Megan. Okay, I'm ready to listen to you. I want the truth. If you lie to me once and I feel it, you're out the door with all your stuff. It can't get any worse than what I've already done, so I'm willing to confirm everything on a polygraph if you want," she replied. "Great idea about the polygraph. Remind me later. I'm not sure if your story, even if it's true, will help you. But it's worth a shot. Remember, I only want the truth. Otherwise, everything else is meaningless." So what happened? I opened another bottle of beer, ate a toast with sausage, and listened to her. She started from the beginning. "The next morning, after a huge fight about something I can't even remember, I stopped outside a cafe to be alone and have a cup of coffee. A little while later, two drunken young men accosted me. I tried to shoo them away, but they grabbed me and dragged me to their car. Then Adele intervened. A fight broke out and he was hit on the head with a bottle and ran away. Naturally, I started helping him, called an ambulance, and while he was on his way to the hospital, I was just like a sister of mercy. But then we ran into each other again, supposedly by accident. I interrupted her. "Oh, come on, that's such a classic pickup artist move. The girl gets attacked by bad guys and then the hero shows up and saves her. It's old and corny. We used to do that in high school." "Anyway," she continued, "the Arab got hit and I called an ambulance. We ran into each other again later. He knew how to woo me in an eloquent Oriental way. He was gentle, gave me flowers, pseudo-expensive gifts, and so on. He promised me the world and hypnotized me to the point where I was ready to leave my family. I assure you, we were just hanging out. Sitting in cafes and restaurants, horseback riding, walks, flowers, gifts. He kissed me a couple of times, but it never went further because of our agreement." "Yes," I said. "Life's routine and predictability can dull any relationship." She continued, "We arrived at the airport with my passport and plane ticket to Istanbul. Adele told me we'd fly to Dubai via Turkey. He had a business matter to attend to for the day and I'd wait for him at the hotel. Then we'd go back to the airport and fly to Dubai. But as soon as we started to check in, 3 plainclothes men approached us. They escorted us to a line patrol, introduced themselves as Interpol agents and one FBI officer, and asked for our documents. Adele was frightened. His eyes went wide. He tried to run away, but he was seized and they put handcuffs on his wrists. They were taken into an office and seated in different rooms. Megan couldn't understand what was happening. She started to get upset. "Let us go. There must be some mistake." "Please calm down," a policeman said, giving Megan a coffee. Then a blonde, pretty girl came into the office, and Megan thought she had seen her somewhere before. Her face was very familiar. Then Adele was brought in, and the girl's eyes were bloodshot. "For what you did to me," she hissed. "You should have been killed on the spot. But that would have been too easy for you. You'll rot in prison where you'll die." Then she turned to the police and said, "Yes, that's him." Megan sat there puzzled and didn't understand what was going on. Adele was taken away, not even looking at Megan. The policeman explained to Megan that Adele, as he calls himself, is a recruiter. He tricks girls and young women under the guise of being an eligible fiancé, then takes them to a hotel in Turkey where they are coerced into situations against their will. Can you imagine what would have happened to you if he had managed to take you away? Megan burst into tears. "No," she sobbed. She didn't feel sorry for Adele. She wasn't sorry at all. Her Oriental fairy tale had turned out to be just a mirage. She remembered her life and her daughter. Megan continued. "The police gave me a statement to sign and offered me a ride home. I bought cognac, chocolate, and fruit. I was waiting for you. I swear to you I had nothing with him. I know there's no excuse for what I did. What I wanted to do was despicable and vile, and I can imagine the payback that would have awaited me for what I did. But I'm truly sorry, and I beg you to forgive me. I said, okay, you can stay for now, but don't think I've forgiven you yet. I have to check things out and sort things out. Neither my daughter nor my parents will know about this yet. Of course, everything she just told me sounded good, but some things were questionable. I took a shower, shaved, and brushed my teeth. I decided not to take her to the polygraph and embarrass her. Instead, I decided to verify her story another way. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of a friend of mine from college who worked in the FBI. Hello, Bob, it's Michael. I need to meet you. I have a business matter to discuss. Sure thing, buddy. Come to my office. You remember where it is. When's convenient for you? I'll be there in half an hour, I replied. Half an hour later, I was standing in Bob's office. Sit down, he said cheerfully. So tell me, how are your parents? How's Julia? How's Megan? Let's talk about Megan, I said, briefly outlining the situation. Bob reacted with indignation. Jesus Christ, what an idiot. Where was her head when she did this? Where was her head and everything else? I want to find out if my wife slept with that freak or if it was really like she said. Bob hooked me up with the right people, and this is what they told me. At the very cafe where Megan had originally gone for coffee, one of Adele's former victims was working as a waitress. She recognized him immediately and notified law enforcement, who asked her to stay out of it so they wouldn't scare him off. They tracked down the scumbags who had molested my wife and questioned them. Turns out it was Adele who paid them to stage the attack. They claimed they didn't know what they were signing up for. Adele said he really liked Megan and that this was his way of winning her heart. The operatives notified Interpol because he'd been on their radar for 3 years, recruiting girls from all USA. They put him under 24-hour surveillance, especially Adele. Megan's cell phone was also tapped, and she was under the watchful eye of the detectives. This confirmed that they really had nothing to do with her. Megan's conditions about intimacy before the divorce were taken calmly by Adele. He didn't need it. Megan was just a target for which he was paid. Naturally, if there had been an emergency, the operatives would have intervened and not allowed Megan to do something regrettable. The operatives convinced me that recruiters like Adele are well-trained professionals who know their business. I went to that cafe having gotten the name of the waitress beforehand. Her name was Lisa. I sat down at the table and asked her to come over. She came over and said quietly, "I'm listening." I introduced myself and said I was the husband of the woman she might recognize. Lisa asked me to take a seat. We went into a private booth and she started her story. I met Adele, who was going by another name then, 4 years ago. I was a student at the time. I was coming back from a lecture and accidentally broke my heel. I fell and twisted my leg. He helped me and took me to the emergency room. Then he wooed me, invited me to cafes, gave me flowers and gifts, and promised me the world. He proposed, and I said yes. When we flew to Istanbul and got to the hotel, he asked me to wait while he picked up some documents. When he left, 2 guys came in, gave me something to drink, and I blacked out. I woke up in a house, but it was a nightmare. They kept me under close watch and controlled my every move. I was lucky to escape when a kind man who I confided in helped me out and took me to the embassy. I spent a long time in recovery. Now I'm just trying to rebuild my life. I asked her, "Are you still with him now?" "No," she replied. "He's married. While I was going through all that, my mom passed away and I was left alone. I got a job here as a waitress. Then I saw him at the cafe picking up your wife, and I recognized him. My first thought was to confront him, but I decided to call the police instead." Her story confirmed what Megan had told me. The girl had practically saved my wife from imminent danger. I thanked Lisa, wished her happiness, and went home, where a nice dinner and a soft, warm bed were waiting for me. In short, my wife was reinstated at her job because they couldn't find a replacement in such a short period. Neither our parents nor our daughter were told anything about the ordeal. I know some might judge me, especially men, but I forgave her, though it took time. It left a mark on my soul, and I had to see psychologists. We worked hard on our relationship and life eventually got back to normal. After 6 years, we got divorced anyway. It wasn't because of anything specific, but because we had grown apart. Perhaps the past events had left a lingering impact. We parted peacefully without any resentment, and we even managed to maintain a friendly relationship. By then, we both were doing well. After the divorce, I started dating Lisa. She had managed to heal from her past, and we had a strong relationship. Eventually, she moved in with me. I found out from Julia that my ex-wife also had a new partner. I was happy for her. I went to Julia's wedding with Lisa. By that time, we were already husband and wife. Megan was also not alone, but with her partner, who was an older gentleman. Megan knew Lisa, but her companion was new to her. We all had a friendly chat and congratulated the young couple together. With Lisa, I am happy and content in every way. We are now planning to adopt a child since she can't have children of her own because of that cruel acts in Turkey. That's how it is. In conclusion, the events that once seemed like insurmountable obstacles have now become chapters in the story of my life that I look back on with a sense of acceptance and peace.